little recap. I mean, not really a recap, but we already hit the offensive side of the game plan, right? We talked about the coverage tendencies, all those things, and we may roll back to this here in a minute as we dive into the defensive game plan against the Cowboys. We talked about establishing the run early. You just see some of the key analytics here, the stats to kind of back up the way we would approach this game against the Cowboys. So let's jump into the defensive game plan. All right. So first things first, what do the Cowboys do on offense, right? And it all starts with personnel. You know, personnel, when you hear us say 11 personnel, right, that's one running back, one tight end. That's where the 1 of 11 comes from. And, of course, that means it's 3 wide receiver set. Why is that important? That's going to trigger our nickel 4-2-5 look most of the time. Sometimes we may lean into a 4-3 if it's a run-heavy team out of 11 personnel, but 9 times out of 10, that's going to trigger the nickel 4-2-5 look. So the Cowboys run 11 personnel 74.2% of the time. Okay, so they are an 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver set heavy team, hands down. Second most personnel they run is 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. They run that 11% of the time. Then 21 personnel, 7.2% of the time. Then 22, 3.4% of the time. Okay, so they don't very, very, very rarely do they go with an 0-1 set, which is essentially no running back, 1 tight end, 4 wide receivers, spread everything out type look. Now, they may go with an empty spread look out of an 11 personnel. I'm sure they do that quite often. But nonetheless, the point here is you should see our nickel defense on the field quite often. However, there's a little caveat this week, right? You've got CeeDee Lamb that's going to be injured. Okay. You've also got a couple starting offensive linemen that are injured. So maybe the Cowboys say, hey, let's press into 12 a little bit so we can have 2 tight ends chip a little bit more. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that 11% maybe jump up to a 15% for this coming week. We'll see how that falls into place as well. But again, 11 personnel is predominantly what they run on offense. Let's talk about what their favorite plays have been. Okay. Now listen, this is strictly in the passing game. I didn't spend much time at all on the running game. So I wanted to highlight, and this is how I like to scout teams. And I even like to self-scout the Packers. Being a Packer fan, I call it self-scouting. Obviously I'm not on the staff, or else they would have a much suckier record. But I like to look and go, okay, where are their explosive plays coming from? Who are the players making those explosive plays? What are the formation, the sets, the personnel that they're making those plays on as well? Okay, so what I've identified is 3 players. Now, I'm going to mention CeeDee Lamb, even though he's out for this game against the Packers. And the reason I'm going to mention him is because they'll probably try to fill someone else into that role and still accomplish the same thing they've been doing up to this point, because they've had a pretty effective passing offense. Dak Prescott's, I think, the second highest rated quarterback or graded quarterback according to PFF. Now, I think he's thrown 3 interceptions. I want to say 3 touchdowns, 3 picks. I could be wrong on those numbers. We'll try to dive into them here on the back side of the show. However, this is the first play that came to mind here. You're going to notice all these are from the Giants game. For the most part, they are. It isn't that I just went and watched the Giants game. These were the most explosive plays from all 3 games early in the season here. And you like to look at the most recent way that they're attacking defenses. That seems to be the hot hand that they will continue to play. It just so happened to be against the Giants. No surprise there, right? So the first play, 12 ace nasty, 26 fake, strike, Y leak, U safe, and it's a 33-yard pass to CeeDee Lamb. So, again, what is that 12 ace nasty? This is one of the rare times, like we said, 11% of the time they're in 12 personnel. Notice they're in a balanced 12 look, right? So you got 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers. They're in nasty splits inside the numbers, and they're going to run a 26 fake. So they're kind of showing an outside stretch play on here. We're not going to roll the video for copyright purposes, but we've drawn the play out here just to give you an idea of how they're going to try to attack the Packers defense. So, again, 26 fake, that just means 2 is the running back, is the first number. 6 means they're going off tackle, outside run right. The even numbers are to the right. If this was to the left, then you would call it a 27. It would be the play call here, a 27 fake. So they're going to fake an outside stretch. It's not a boot action, not a rollout. It's just a deep set so that Dak Prescott can kind of get set and deliver the pass. So strike, what's strike? Strike concept is really simple. On one side of the formation, you have a go route or a deep route. It could be a post. It could be a corner. But what makes it a strike concept is on one side of the formation, you got a receiver going deep, and on the other, you've got a climb or a crosser coming across. And the goal there is to stretch the defense vertically on that side and then hit the second window. Although there is a first window, you could hit that crosser in, that climb in, right? And the reason I'm saying crosser and climb, everybody uses a little bit different terminology when you're coaching football. A climb route is essentially a deep crosser route. Okay. Some people call it climb because there's some choice aspects. So you're just climbing through the defense to find the open spot. But predominantly, it's going to look mostly like a crosser, if that makes sense. So again, that's the strike concept. The go on the left side with the 1, and then you've got the crosser or the climb off the opposite side. You're clearing out deep, and then you're trying to hit the space that's void underneath. They nail CeeDee Lamb on this play, the crosser here, for 33 yards. Now, the reason I mention that, once again, what have we noticed about Hafley's defense this year? Early in this 3-week season so far, Hafley's shown a lot of cover 1 man, not more than any other defense, but just he started off last week was a lot of cover 1 man, and that put him up in, I think, the 20 percentile, something like that, in terms of his defensive play calls. So I mentioned that because when you're playing cover 1 man, the number 1 beater for that are crossing routes, in my opinion. That's the way we typically attack defenses, which surprised me last week. And one of the reasons why I felt like the offense struggled for Matt LaFleur was we didn't have a whole lot of crossing concepts. We were running a lot of deep digs and outs along with it. Now, when you got a quarterback that has the arm strength that Jordan Love does, he still, to the best of my knowledge, has the fastest clocked thrown pass in the next gen era. I think it was at 61 miles per hour, the seam shot. The seam shot, what I call the base throw, the base shot, last year against Tucker Kraft. To Tucker Kraft against the Houston Texans. So when you've got that kind of arm strength, then you maybe want to attack cover 1 man outside shoulder because you got a quarterback with the arm strength. I personally didn't like the passing game plan last week because you didn't see a whole lot of crossers. Crossers is when you got 2 crossing routes, if that makes sense. So you may see that here in a minute. So again, 12 ace and nasty, 26 fake, strike, Y leak. The Y is just going to block and then leak out here. That's typically Ferguson for them. And the U is staying safe, the block, so you've got a 6-man protection. And then, of course, the running back after the 26 fake is just going to run a little shoot route, kind of sit down outside and be a check down for Dak. He hammered it to CeeDee Lamb there for 33 yards. Let's move on to the second play. This play, you got 11 gun, Trey Wright, 94-49, T safe. All right. Now, what does all that mean? In 11, Trey Wright, you got 1 running back, 1 tight end, and we call it Trey because there's 3 targets to the right, one of which is the tight end. If that was 3 wide receivers and this guy by himself up here up top was a tight end, it would be called trips right because it's 3 wide receivers as opposed to 2 wide receivers and a tight end. That's the difference between trips and Trey. I'm always going to explain that because it's important to understand how they try to position the Y, depending on how effective the Y is as a flex player, essentially as a wide receiver, or if they like to put him by himself in an isolation play like the Patriots like to do a lot with Gronk back in the day. So the play call, 11 gun, Trey Wright, 94-49. Guys, that's just the route tree, okay? You got a 9 route, which is a go. You got a 4, which is a curl. You got a 4, which is a curl. And then you got a 9, that's another go. And the T is staying safe here, okay? Which means he's staying in a block, another 6-man protection. So you're already seeing the tendency here. We showed 12. Now we're in 11. They're showing a Trey Wright look. And what they've got is a couple of high-low reads here. They're working the middle of the field underneath on curls, and they've got a couple shot routes and 9 routes. But the thing that's common here is you're keeping a 6-man protection in both of the first plays we caught. This ends up getting checked down to Ferguson for 18 yards on the curl route. The thing I noticed about Ferguson, I believe, I could be wrong, if I remember correctly, though, this was the longest gain he's had all year. Now, we've talked about Ferguson gets a lot of targets from Dak, especially now that CD is going to be hurt because I think they did that a lot last week once CD left the game. So it's important to understand, well, what's Ferguson do? He's kind of checked down Charlie. And I know that's going to upset a lot of Wisconsin fans because that's Barry Alvarez's grandson, I believe, if I understood correctly. So I'm not trying to disrespect. That's just how they utilize him. I'll tell you something else. We do that with Tucker Kraft, so it's not necessarily a shot. We love him on shallow crosses, drags, leaks, things like that, right? So in this case, 11 gun, Trey Wright, 94-49, go, curl, curl, go, T safe, Ferguson for 18 yards right here out of the Trey Wright Y position, okay? So there's the second play. Now let's move on to the next target, which is George Pickens, okay? Pickens will probably be your leading receiver now for them. He's going to be the guy that at least that's what they want to do predominantly. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to put him in CD Lamb's old spot and just have him kind of, and then next man up, let them operate as if they're George Pickens. Now, the problem is George Pickens and CD Lamb have two different skill sets, right? So CD Lamb is more of your slot receiver that's going to run the crossers and things like that. However, when you watch this play right here, and not watch, but we draw it up, you're going to see they're in 12 gun, dub nasty crossers, double leak flats, okay? T safe. So again, 12 gun. In this case, they're in a gun set. They're in a nasty split. Dubs means 2 by 2. You got 1, 2 on the left, 1, 2 on the right with a sidecar right as well. That's called dubs or doubles. We call it dubs because it's a lot easier to say, less syllables, right? So this passing concept is going to be 12 gun, dub nasty, crossers, double leak, and both those leaks are going to be the flat. Okay. Now there's a little bit of a play action look, but they kind of mail it in. So I didn't mention, but it could have been like a 21 fake or a 22 fake. I didn't feel like that's what they were trying to accomplish. The running back just kind of puts his hands out, steps up, and he's blocking. Once again, what are you seeing though? You're seeing a 6-man protection. It starts off as an 8-man protection, but then you got the double leak, meaning the tight ends are going to leak out in the flat here. Here's the crosser concept we were talking about, okay? So now we've seen strike. That attacks cover 1 man pretty effectively, and now we're seeing crossers. That affects or attacks cover 1 man pretty effectively. That's why I'm saying let's steer clear of the cover 1 man this week, Half. Let's make them read the defense. Let's go with a little cover 6 match. Let's go with a little cover 3 look. Let's kind of stick to that this week. And also, when you're in a zone defense, if you kind of erase the match for a second and you just play spot drop right out of cover 3, or if you want to play a little country quarters, something like that, you've got your eyes on Dak all day long in case he tries to scramble, right? So just wanted to mention that. Now, again, the crosser, this right here was George Pickens up top, the 1 left. He's going to run a crosser, and it's almost like a deep mesh concept that you see here. He ends up hitting George Pickens here for 27 yards. So again, what's the purpose of showing you guys these play diagrams? I watched every snap of the Cowboys just once. I didn't get a chance to watch it the second time through, but I went and watched all 3 games, all 22 film, and tried to pick out the things that really stood out to me. Well, you see they run 11 most of the time, but 2 of these plays that we're highlighting actually came out of 12 personnel. It's important to note because this week you're probably going to press into 12 a little bit more than you have in the past with CD Lamb out of the lineup. And you can darn sure bet you're going to be doing these chip releases here, at least at a minimum, with the way the Packers pass rush has been effective this week. So again, just wanted to point it out. Right here, you got a strike concept where they hit an explosive. Here you got a curl. That's one of the check downs that they use to Ferguson. And then, of course, you got crossers, the big hitter here to George Pickens. So it goes on to say the Packers defense must capitalize on the Cowboys' injuries and create chaos with their dominant front 7. The key here, guys, is going to be to create pressure on Dak Prescott. I would rather them do that with 7-man coverage and just rush 4. I think we can get to him with 4. With the way Rashawn Gary's playing, leading the league in sacks, Micah Parsons is drawing all kinds of attention when he is on the field. Lucas Van Ness is having one of his better years. I think he's grading out somewhere around 72, 73, something like that. Let's just try to get pressure with 4. And if we're not hitting home by halftime, then adjust. But let's make Dak throw into traffic all freaking day long. Let's play a little more zone than we have here in the first 3 weeks so you can keep eyes on Dak and make sure he doesn't scramble on you. And, of course, you're looking to stop the run. I don't think they're going to come out. I don't think Schottenheimer's just going to come out and just wing it all over the yard. I think he'll try to establish the run. I have faith that our defense can stop that. That's the other thing. If you come out and you play with a spur look, meaning one of the safeties into the box, then you play zone, you could still have a cover 3 or a cover 6 match look and have an extra spur in the box to help stop the run. And again, you just don't want to neglect